Today, we're going to be talking about resilience. And before we get started, I'd love to invite you to some of our upcoming events. We have some health screenings that we would love for you to participate in, some coming up in just the month of February and March. So take a look at those if you're interested and haven't already done your health screening for the year. We also have some additional wellness classes that are coming up on February 24th on cardiovascular health. We also on February 25th have the Crimson Couch to 5K. So we're going to be doing some fun things in conjunction with the cardiovascular health class. So we hope you'll come for that. We also have some on stress and gratitude. And then we have the upcoming programs, the Crimson Couch to 5K, Better Bites, which is a nutrition program, and I highly recommend it. It's wonderful. And then another Move Spring Challenge for this spring. So lots of exciting things coming up with wellness and work life on campus. Today, we're going to talk about resilience. And I know that sometimes when we try to carve out an hour of time that isn't something we typically do, it can be challenging. And so I just want to encourage you to take this next hour to really focus on yourself and your goals. And if you feel comfortable, I would love to know why you're interested in resilience. Usually there's a reason for why we pick the classes that we do. Sometimes it's just that it fits in our schedule, but sometimes it's that we really have a need or an interest there. And I'd love to make sure that we cover something that's important to you. You also can use the Q&A feature, and it has the option to make that anonymous. And so even I can't see who answers and asks those questions. So just know that that is an option there for you. But sometimes when we say it's time to relax, that can be very stressful. So I'm not going to tell you to relax, and I am going to invite you to just take the next hour to really think about how you can show up well for yourselves. And you're already doing that by being here. So road to resilience, I use that language intentionally because it really is a road. It is a journey to get to a place where you're feeling resilient. And it is all about, for me, becoming the best version of yourself. And that isn't about perfectionism or about, trying to be the best for everyone in your lives, but really it's about showing up well for yourselves and really getting to enjoy the life that you're creating. My name is Abby Horton. For those of you who've not come to classes before, it's so nice to meet you. And I will do just a brief introduction. I am a registered nurse. I teach here at the Capstone College of Nursing here at UA. I'm a certified health and life coach, which is why I'm here with you, talking about all things health and wellness. I'm a Wellbama ambassador for the Honors College, where I teach part-time, and I'm the wellness class educator. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer those. If you want to unmute at the end, you can definitely do that, or you can put things in the chat. But if you have questions or need something after the presentation, my email is here for you. It's abby.horton@ua.edu. And I know sometimes it's easier to just send an email, or maybe you have a question that comes up after the presentation. Please feel free to reach out. That's what I'm here for. So our goals are really to talk about stress and self-care and to talk about resilience, but more importantly, to really learn specific strategies to help you cope with positive, really well adaptive responses to stress, and to be able to foster and enhance your resilience. So you can't really talk about stress and resilience apart from one another. When to seek help. So if you're someone who's feeling overly sad or angry or overwhelmed or just not yourself, if you're using unhealthy coping mechanisms, if you are grieving, maybe you've lost someone or something important to you, maybe you've had a stressful life event or a trauma, or just, the things that you normally are doing to make yourselves feel better or to cope with certain things aren't working, then it may be time to seek professional help. And I always like to start our presentations with these sorts of topics with this disclaimer that we sometimes just need some professional help and support. And we have so many great resources here at UA for you to be able to take advantage of. So here are some of those resources. Again, we have things through our, counseling center, our, faculty staff clinic. We have so many great resources on campus and in the West Alabama community, and also some really great national resources as well. So these are there for you if you need them. And we would love to reach out if you, have any questions or concerns. We'll help direct you to those resources if you need that. So I like to start a lot of my presentations with this graphic. It's one that I put together of 4 of my favorite graphics, and it's really all about focusing on what you can control. Sometimes it feels like we are spinning out of control. Sometimes it feels like we have very little control over what's going on in our lives. And I'm going to raise my hand and say that is true for me sometimes too. Just because I teach and talk on this topic and study mental health and resilience and stress and coping doesn't mean I have it all figured out. I'm still a work in progress. And I know for me, it's important to remember that there are certain things that I can control and there are certain things that I can't. And so a lot of times when we talk about stress and we talk about resilience, we talk about stress as if we shouldn't have any stress. We talk about it as if we should be completely stress-free. And my joke is always that totally stress-free is a playlist on Spotify, but it is not real life. That's not the human experience. And so it's a great playlist, but it's really not a realistic goal for us to be totally stress-free. So this first quote, the goal isn't to get rid of all of your negative thoughts and feelings. That's impossible. The goal is to change your response to them. And so later on, we're going to talk about responsibility. If you've ever come to my talks on resilience, this one is completely new. I have reused some of the things that I think work really well, but I've added a lot of new content because I think so many people are struggling with resilience and stress and overwhelm right now. So don't worry about what you can't control, but rather focus on the things that you can. So in that third graphic, the remote control, we always want to be able to, control things. I think having the remote control, being in that place of power, that's something that we probably covet. I don't usually have the remote control in my family at home, literally or figuratively sometimes. But when we have a remote in our hand, we feel like we can just pause. It's kind of like Zach Morris on Saved by the Bell. If we could just freeze time and get ahead of things, we would be doing great. I hope I'm not the only one who gets that reference or who feels that way sometimes. But really, the things that we can control are our attitude and our effort. There are other things listed here, but it all goes back to attitude and effort and kind of the way that we approach things. And so we can't control other people. That shouldn't be a goal for us. Sometimes when we talk about healthy boundary setting, we talk about that as if we're trying to control someone else's response. And when we talk about responsibility in a little bit, we're going to talk about how that looks for us, because healthy boundaries is not about I'm going to control what someone else does. It's about how am I going to respond to that person when they violate my boundaries or cross that boundary. Okay, good, Jonathan. I'm glad you remember Saved by the Bell. It's one of my favorite shows growing up. So if that tells you anything, I'm an 80s baby raised in the 90s. So love that. So the things that matter and the things that you can control. The Venn diagram on the right, I love a good Venn diagram because I think it really helps us, if you're a visual, see the important things in life when you're like, okay, that overlaps, that's where I need to focus. And so that's really what I want you to think about. The things that matter in your life and the things that you have control over, where those overlap, that's where you need to focus your time and your attention and your effort and your energy. So there are things that matter in life that are really important to us, that are meaningful, and we have no control over those things. And it can be super, super frustrating. And then there are things that we can control that honestly aren't that important, but we can get into this cycle of you feel out of control in some areas of your life. So you then try to control or micromanage things that aren't so important. And we all do that sometimes because we're human. So I hope this is helpful to set the tone for our talk today. Stress, when we think about stress, it's really feeling like we don't have what's necessary to be able to do what we need to do. So it's mental and physical demands that we put on ourselves, and it's demands and pressures that we feel in a situation, but we may not feel like we have the time or the tools or the energy or, fill in the blank to be able to cope with those demands or pressures. And that's when stress sets in. And when we start to feel stress, we can start to feel like we aren't so resilient. So when we think of stress, we often think of it as being good or bad. And we like to moralize things. We like to say that this is a good food, or this is a bad food, or this is good stress, or this is bad stress. And you'll sometimes hear me say that because it's just our default language in healthcare and in life in the US, and it's part of our culture. But stress is something that the body's response, does to a physical or mental demand. It's an automatic response that we don't have 100% control of. So our body is going to respond to a physical stressor. If you have to go pick up something heavy this afternoon, that's going to be a physical stressor on your body. If you've got to go and maybe, you know, manage a situation at work, or maybe manage a behavioral issue if you have children. If you've got to go and do something like that this afternoon after you've worked all day and you're tired, that's going to be a mental stressor on your body. And that's not something that you want to try to control. You just want to manage your expectations. And stress is an expected and even necessary part of our lives. And so the goal is not to be stress-free or to get our stress super, super low. It's to manage our response to the stressor. So adrenaline and cortisol are part of that hormone stress response that we have. And we don't want to stay in a constant state of having high cortisol levels and high adrenaline levels, because that's where you start to really, experience physical burnout that's going to lead to emotional and mental burnout. And so we often talk about the fight or flight response that's elicited through the stress response. And the example that's always given is the saber-toothed tiger in prehistoric days, where you have a cave person and you have the image of the saber-toothed tiger, and the tiger is running after, or kind of, posturing toward the cave person. And the cave person is shown either fighting, with the club in hand, the saber-toothed tiger, and kind of facing that stress head on, or they're shown running away or fleeing, or that flight response. But sometimes, and I think what we do more often in our everyday lives, is we freeze. And there are many other responses, and it's fun that they all start with F's. So it's alliteration at its best, but there are like 9 to 12 different responses you can have to stress, starting with an F. There's something called fawning. There's something called facing. There's just many different ones that we could talk about. But freeze is what I'm going to talk about today, because I think that's what I see most often, whether it's a patient, a health and life coach client here at UA, a student, just in my own personal life, we freeze. And that looks like not taking action. That looks like scrolling social media after work. That looks like saying that we feel stuck or we're not sure what to do. If you hear yourself saying those things, or, doing things that are kind of distractors that make you feel, productive, but you're not really productive, you're probably in a freeze response because you just don't know what to do. And that's what leads to overwhelm. Overwhelm is usually not that you, are completely unaware of what's going on. It's really that you just don't know where to start. You have a lot to do, and you don't feel like you have the ability to do those things. So stress and overwhelm kind of go hand in hand in that situation. And stress can have positive effects. It can have more negative or unhealthy effects. We call that adaptive or maladaptive coping. So adaptive coping is that you do yoga and you walk after work because you're stressed and you're wanting to be healthy. Maladaptive or more negative or unhealthy coping is going to be maybe you're binge eating, or maybe you're using food or alcohol to numb your feelings. Those are more negative effects. But moderate levels of stress are actually needed to help improve your performance, your efficiency, and just keep you at your baseline. It's to help you manage your life well. So managing stress helps lead to fostering resilience. And the thing about resilience, and I'll probably mention this several times, is that resilience is like a muscle that has to be exercised. So if you are in a completely stress-free environment and you're not doing the things to build resilience, then you're not going to have as much resilience. So resilience is really built not despite adversity, but because of adversity. So I tell people that, when you build resilience, it's not that you go and take a class like this, or you go and do a workshop, or you read a book on resilience. Resilience is really like that muscle you have to exercise in the gym. You've got to be in the environment of needing to build resilience. And over the last 2 or 3 years with COVID-19, that's been something that we've all had to use our resilience and our stress and coping, because we've all faced new challenges that we haven't had before. And so I think it's important to note that, resilience doesn't happen just, kind of out of nowhere. Resilience really happens because you are having difficulties and challenges. And that is the beautiful thing about adversity, is that you can have the result of developing resilience, which leads to other really positive attributes and characteristics. And so we'll talk more about that. Stressors, there's so many stressors that we could list here. I've put categories of stressors. Work-life balance, busy schedules, and feelings of uncertainty are probably the big ones that we probably all share. But it could be things like maintaining relationships, caregiving responsibilities, financial concerns, the COVID-19 pandemic. There are so many others that you could list here. And it's important for you to understand what your particular stressors are and the ones that are most concerning to you, because for everyone on the call today, there are going to be people who are more in that busy season of life with feeling like your schedule's overly full and you don't have reliable childcare, or you're trying to get a good balance between work and life, which is hard to do. And so, if you're in that season of young children and that season of life, that's going to feel differently to someone on the call who maybe isn't in that season. Maybe their concern is going back to graduate school while working, or maybe it's financial concerns, or maybe it's family relationships. And so just knowing what your major stressors are is really important for self-awareness, because then we can get to the point of identifying our triggers. If you know what your major stressors are, then you can start to individualize, okay, here's a trigger, here's how I can respond to that. So if you think of your major categories, write down 2 or 3 things that are really stressful for you right now. And try to be very specific. Don't just put work or family, but put what's really stressing you out right now. So I can give a few examples. Dinner time is pretty stressful in my house because I have 5 young school-aged children. And so it's a bit chaotic, as you can imagine. And that has been a stressor for me. And so I had to really name that. If I had just said kids or family or something more generic, that wouldn't have gotten me to the point of recognizing that what's really stressful for me at home right now is dinner time. And then when I get to that point, I can write down what's stressful about dinner time. And it's usually that, everyone's going a million different directions. The phone's ringing, the doorbell might be ringing, the dog is barking. Inevitably, everyone calls you at 5 o'clock. Is that just me? I would love to know if everyone else is calling you between 5 and 6 when you're trying to transition to home and dinner. Everyone that's ever needed to reach you, it's between 5 and 6, I feel like. So, it's those kind of things. So what are things you could do about that? Well, you could, once you identify the trigger, because the stressor, you can try to avoid it or limit your triggers. And that sometimes works. You definitely need to decide how to respond to the trigger, right? Yelling and screaming and, that sort of thing could be our default. And that doesn't really help anything, especially not in this situation. And so, okay, how are you going to show up? How are you going to respond to this? Okay, so the first moment that things start to go wrong, you can count to 10, you can take some deep breaths, you can walk out of the room. Those are things that you can do when you need to respond and you don't feel like you can be in the moment and handle the situation. Then you can come back to the situation and take care of it, right? And then hopefully you can start to say, okay, here are some things I can do. I can turn my ringer off of my house phone. If you still have one, we do. I can put my phone away while I'm cooking dinner, so I don't know if I'm getting a call or a text. That works sometimes. Sometimes we have to be on call, but other times we can do that. We can let the dog go outside, to the backyard while we're cooking dinner, so he's not underfoot. We could have kids assigned to specific jobs to be able to have their attention really focused and they're not milling around the kitchen. So that could be something, we have people who are putting out plates and cups and helping with the dinners and giving them jobs to do. So those are some ways that you can, very easily break down what's the stressor, what's the trigger, and then here are the solutions for it. And that is a real world example from my life that we implemented over COVID, and it worked beautifully. It doesn't mean that dinner's not stress-free. You still have to cook the food. You still have to do all of the things associated, but it can actually make life a little bit better. And then explore self-care and stress management strategies. I have a good friend who always says, the fuller you are, she's talking about, when you're making choices about, health and wellness and weight loss, the fuller you are, the more self-control you have. So meaning the more that you fill up on the good stuff, like her example is that she's, eating a lot of vegetables, she's drinking a lot of water. Then she tells us, she's a health and life coach. And so she's telling us, oh, you'll have more self-control when you have, the Snickers bar or the donut or whatever is your favorite candy or treat. You'll have more self-control to say no. Well, that same principle applies when you're taking good care of yourselves and you're getting enough rest and you're getting enough nutrition and you're sleeping well and you're hydrated and you're exercising and you're taking good care of your body. The more self-control you're going to have when you have stressors and triggers. And so we know that, but I think it's important to say that and remind us of that, because knowledge does not equal habit change. We can know what to do, but that doesn't mean that we're going to do it. And so oftentimes we just need the external accountability and the reminders to be able to say, you know what? I do need to remember that I need to do X, Y, or Z, or I need to take care of myself. So explore self-care and stress management strategies to help you cope and to help you take good care of yourselves. Stress management, when we take good care of our bodies, our health improves. We have more energy and stamina to manage things when they don't go well. We can have better emotion, regularity and management. We can have better focus, which is going to help us when we do have challenges or setbacks. We build our skills and our confidence. And when we build our skills and confidence, that leads to self-trust. And we're going to talk more about that. And then we do actually foster that resilience. So when we talk about resilience, we often say, how well do you bounce back? And the image is always of like one of those little balls that you can get in a kid's toy. And it's always bouncing off the ground in the photo, and it's going really high up in the image, right? And the thing about it is that we can bounce back after challenges, but more importantly, it's how do you work through the challenge? There are a lot of quotes about, when you're going through a difficult time, how do you respond? And the gist of those is that you have to just go through it. You can't go around it, over it. You can't sneak under it. If you have a challenge or a setback or adversity, the best way is just through that challenge. And a lot of times we as humans like to try to avoid the stressors or challenges because we feel like that's our job. Our brain's favorite thing to do is to protect us. It's a survival mechanism, back to that prehistoric stress response. Our brain is pretty primitive in terms of trying to keep us alive and keep us surviving. And so if there's something that's unpleasant, even if it's not dangerous, our body perceives it as unpleasant and dangerous, like exercise. We don't like to exercise because it's putting stress on the body, and it puts us in a stress response, especially if we're working out and doing really, hardcore things like HIIT interval training or CrossFit or Orange Theory. Something like that is going to put a big stressor on our body, and our body's like, no, my job is to protect you. You should not do that. Even though in the long run, you'll be better for it if exercise is done well. Or, if you make it through this particular challenge, you're going to have skills and abilities and a different perspective. And it's going to be a good thing probably in the end, but your body is really resistant to it because your brain is saying it's not safe. And so you've got to really think about your mindset. And it's not necessarily how well we bounce back, although you're going to hear that language around resilience. It's more about how do you persevere even when things aren't going well. So resilience is defined in many different ways. I've done research on this and it can get very complicated. So I want to really simplify it into the sense of it's about adapting in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant stress. And so that is the basic ability of you just to be able to, respond and adapt well. That's what resilience is. And so we want you to be able to thrive. And health is oftentimes really defined around disease. We think about health as being something related to a disease or not having a disease. But health is more than the absence of disease or injury. It's really a state of complete physical, mental, social well-being. And so even back as far as 1947, the World Health Organization has recognized that. And certainly they've updated this, for many years. And there's a much, more recent definition, which is basically the same definition in essence. But I want you to see that we've known for a really long time that health is more than just disease free. States it's really about that holistic health. And so we need to start working toward that as best as we can. So a state of being that people define in relation to their own values, personality, and lifestyle. That's something I want to really mention here, is that what is healthy for me may not be healthy for you. So we talk about healthy foods, and that's important, right? There are healthier foods than others, but what would be a good healthy meal for me may not be that for you. If you have, celiac or gluten intolerance or gluten sensitivity, you can have whole grain breads, and that is a healthier food. That is a good food. But for someone who has that sensitivity or that allergy, it isn't a good or healthy food for them. And so it is about what our values are. It is about our personality. It is about our lifestyle, and it is about our bio individuality. It's about what works for us. And so health is not a one size fits all approach, but you will hear that a lot in the wellness atmosphere, and certainly on, blogs and Instagram and social media, TikTok, you're going to hear health as being this kind of cookie cutter approach. And I want you to really recognize and hear me say that it isn't. And so do your very best, because you're going to really have to experiment to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So the lifestyle impact on health is really complicated in some senses, because there's so many things that influence, your health, how you think, how you feel, how you act. You certainly can have different health behaviors and health practices that will influence it. There's internal and external variables. There's genetics, there's your environment, there's your access to healthcare. And our needs really drive our approach to health and wellness. And so I always like to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's something that you study in psychology, and that you study in medical, fields for sure. For doctors and nurses and social workers and nutritionists, we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm sure there's others that really use these tenets, but it's about the basic pyramid of needs. So your physiological needs have to get met first, that you have, good food and warm, blankets and or air conditioning if you're in Alabama. You've got, access to food and water. You have the ability to rest. You have, basic needs met. And then you can think about safety concerns, and then about love and belonging, and then about your self-confidence and your self-esteem. And then Maslow says that very few people get to that self-actualization at the top, where you're reaching your full potential and you're having that meaning and purpose. And so much of the personal development and healthcare and health and wellness world is all about self-actualization and reaching that. And Maslow believes that very few people reach that level, because they are still working on those other needs first, the basics, the psychological needs, and then you get to the higher order self-fulfillment. And the reason I mention that is because we often try to skip ahead, right? If y'all are on social media, there's all of the reels and videos and things of, skip to the good part. And it's all about, you go from the before picture to the after picture, and it's set to music. And you see that a lot with health and wellness. And what I want to remind us, and to remind myself too, is that we can't just skip to the good part. That's not what life is really like. It's fun to watch those videos, but it's not true to life. And so you can't skip to the good part of resilience without having walked through the stress and the adversity and the thing that helped you develop that resilience. So resilience does have a health impact. It's important to all areas of our relationship with ourselves and our environment. And resilience and health affect one another. So if you have, resilience and you have resiliency skills, that's going to help you with your health. And if you have good health, that's going to help you be resilient. And so when you can take back control of your mindset and, control what you can control, or can control the controllables, then you really can start to make a difference in how well you respond when you do have a setback, a challenge, a stressor. And we have to build our self-trust, because so many of us don't trust ourselves because we've never kept the promises to ourselves that we have made. And we don't think about it because we don't think about them as breaking promises to ourselves. But we do, and I do it too. So when we say that we're going to get up at a certain time and we hit snooze and we don't get up, that's eroding a little bit of self-trust, because our brain's always listening. And even to what we are planning but don't say out loud, our brain knows. And so if I say I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock today and I hit snooze and I was like, well, I'm going to get up tomorrow at 6 o'clock, we'll just start over. Then we get up the next day at 6:30 because we've hit snooze again. It's eroding our self-trust, because we start to realize, okay, she said she was going to get up at 6 today and she didn't get up. She said she was going to get up at 6 tomorrow and she didn't get up at 6. And so it's that self-trust that we lose out on because we didn't keep our promise. And so resilience really develops in the midst of adversity, but it can't be built if we don't have the self-trust and the self-belief that we're going to follow through with what we say we're going to do. And that is a huge part of, laying a good foundation of resilience is, can we be trusted to do what we say we're going to do? And the thing is that we're really good about keeping our promises to other people, but we're not great about keeping them to ourselves. If you ever have read any of Gretchen Rubin's work, she has a book called The Four Tendencies. And there are some people who can keep promises to themselves. But the vast majority of people are going to be more of an outward focus, and they're going to be more of what she calls obligers, where we'll be happy to do anything for someone else, someone at work, a family member, a friend, but we won't do those things for ourselves, or we won't keep those promises to ourselves. And so that's an important thing to kind of think about. Are you someone who is self-motivated, who will keep those promises, or are you someone who needs more external accountability and you're more likely to keep those promises to someone else? That's a lot of people in the US for sure. So I talked about overwhelm earlier, and I have an entire presentation, but I just pulled this one slide because, again, when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's really about feeling stuck. And it's feeling stuck because you've got stressors that you haven't really explored. So overwhelm, according to Ted Ryder, is busy with an added dose of anxiety and stress, but a deficit of support and time. And so this equation here is busy plus anxious plus stress minus support minus time. And then I added rest, because as a nurse, I see so many people, and I personally do this, where I really don't prioritize rest. We're going to talk about rest too. Like what does that mean? That doesn't mean sleep. And so minus rest equals overwhelm. And so he proposes that how you solve the equation is that you know when and where to start, you know what to do, you actually take action, and then you prioritize and schedule in rest. And rest is not that you sleep 8 hours at night, but it's that you have margin built in your day so that you're not back-to-back appointments or tasks or to-dos all day long. So a lot of times we hit snooze in the morning. I hit snooze too, so I'm going to raise my hand on that one. Hit snooze in the morning, you get up for the day, you're kind of already feeling behind because you didn't get up when you said you're going to get up, and then you're go, go, go all day long. You're on the phone, you're on the computer, you're working, you're managing, kids, families, partners, family members, whatever it is that your day looks like. And then you go to bed at night and you expect to just be able to go to sleep right away. It's like we think it's a light switch that we can just turn on and off. And that's not how our brain works. Our brains really have to boot up, and it has to kind of like wind down. And so, when we think about, okay, we're going to cut the lights off, we're going to turn our phones off, and we're going to just go to sleep, it's not how our body works. And then we can have issues with sleep or insomnia because we're not doing the things we need to do to be able to have good rest and good sleep. And that's where we get all of that restoration mentally and physically, is during our sleep time. but we also need to have built-in rest periods throughout the day too. So taking your lunch break, not eating at your desk every day or skipping lunch like I sometimes do. It's making sure that you take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes in the morning and take a break, making sure that you're going to the restroom, making sure that you're walking around and not just sitting at a desk if that's what your job is like. It's also, if you are in an active, role where you are walking a good bit, it's making sure that you're doing more than just your basics. Because for me, I'm a nurse. I worked 3 12-hour shifts, and I felt I'm really physically active. I'm tired after 3 12-hour shifts when I was working as a floor nurse. But when you look at the research, because that was my norm at that time, it's not now, but at one time it was my norm, then I didn't get credit for that because that was what my body was used to. I had to do above and beyond that level of walking and work to get credit for my health and for my mental health. And that didn't feel very fair, but looking at the research, I see why. And so having some morning, afternoon, and even nighttime breaks, whether it's walking, it's listening to music, it's, closing your eyes and closing your door. If you have a door you can close, whether it's, connecting with someone, a friend, having some coffee, whatever it looks like for you, just having some mindful minutes where you can take a brain break is really, really important. Start with 5 minutes in the morning and build your way up to 5, 10, 15 minutes in the afternoon and in the evening. So 3 times a day, that's only about 45 minutes, depending on how you work all of that out. But 45 minutes is going to be really helpful for you exponentially as you start to make time for rest and for prioritizing your self-care. So we talked about self-trust. We're going to add in some more about that and responsibility. How you develop that self-trust is keeping those promises to yourselves. I included this graphic. It's one that you definitely, can use as a checklist. I always say to treat everything that I share with you like a menu. Take what works for you, what you like, and leave the rest. If you don't resonate with it, then don't worry about it. Just pick what works for you. But have time to feel your feelings. We laugh about that sometimes, but a lot of times we like to just ignore our feelings. The only feelings that we really give validation to sometimes are anger or frustration. Those are emotions that we don't mind having, but the rest of the emotions, we don't always like to feel those. If you have an inner critic, and I think most of us do, to some extent, create a really positive relationship with that inner critic. We all have an inner child. We're all just big kids. And so we've got a child that we need to parent within us. And sometimes that's self-care, and sometimes that's having more responsibility. Just depends on the season and maybe the situation that you're in. But really make self-care a priority, like I mentioned. Listen to your body. I'm someone that really ignores the bells and whistles and alerts that my body needs rest, and I'll push on through until I can't anymore, right? That's when we get sick at night or on the weekend or on a break, because we've pushed our body past its limits and we didn't recognize when our body was telling us, hey, we need some rest. Choose your advice sources carefully. So everyone shouldn't get a say in your life, right? It's the stakeholders in your lives. So who are your trusted people? There's an exercise called Trusted 10, where you identify 10 people who are kind of your circle of trust. And, you may not have 10, you may have more than 10, but who are those people that are really good sources of advice for you and expertise? And those may be people that and those may be people that you just have as a resource. Like I would say for me, Brene Brown's work has been really impactful for me. She's a social work professor in Texas, and she does a lot of great work around mental health and around shame and vulnerability. And she's someone that I can regularly go to her, free resources, her books, and get some good advice. She has no idea who I am, but she's a trusted source of advice for me. But also on that list would be my mom or, my grandmother. And so those are different people that you can think about, but don't let everyone have access to give you advice, because maybe they haven't lived your life. Maybe they don't know enough about you to give that kind of advice. And it's not one size fits all. So notice how you feel when you don't trust yourselves. For me, I always feel really kind of like, I guess probably shame or guilt. I think those go kind of hand in hand when we say we're going to do something, when we say we're going to exercise or get up and we don't do it, you're just like, oh no, I didn't do it again. I let myself down again. And that can be good to recognize that and create awareness, but we don't want to stay in that place because you're not going to make better choices by feeling guilty or shameful about it. So I always tell people, you're not going to hate your body thin. You're not going to, shame or guilt yourself toward doing something better. So those are things to think about. Just giving yourself a lot of love and a lot of grace, but holding yourself accountable for what you're doing. Let go of habits and routines that don't serve you. And I think that's important. Sometimes what worked for us, 2 years ago, don't work anymore. So think about that. Notice when you self-sabotage and procrastinate, a lot of times we have this self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, I've never been able to get up. I'm not a morning person, so I can't do that now. And getting up in the morning, I've used that as an example a lot because it really does set the tone for our day. How we wake up and start our day is so important. We oftentimes will procrastinate. And y'all, I don't know about you. I would love for y'all to put in the chat, what do we think of people who procrastinate? What do we say about those people? What adjective do we assign to someone who procrastinates? I asked my students this last week, and some of them got it and some of them didn't. Do y'all know what adjective we put? Unmotivated, lazy. Yeah, lazy was what I was thinking of. Unmotivated works. Yeah, distracted. I think that's a good one too. Lazy is the one I think of most often. I think that's what a lot of people will say. Thanks for putting that in the chat. And people who procrastinate usually are not anything close to lazy. They're usually perfectionists who are terrified of making a mistake. And so we should never call people lazy or unmotivated or any of those names anyway. But we certainly shouldn't assign it to people who are probably really procrastinating because they're so perfectionistic. And so if you do have people who, so there was one that says careful. Yeah, because they're trying to be really, probably cautious about what they're doing. Maybe they're really concerned about it, so they procrastinate it. But procrastination is actually a coping mechanism, and it's just one that doesn't serve us really well. So when we procrastinate, it's because we don't want to feel the stress of doing the thing. And it's also part of being perfectionistic. And so when you self-sabotage, you definitely probably are trying to get away from that stress response by not doing it. It also could be a focus issue. So people who struggle with focus, who have attention deficit tendencies or focus issues, sometimes need the stress of a deadline to be able to work toward that. And so just think of those kinds of things. Sometimes we don't get that feedback. Yeah, Morgan says fear of failure. Absolutely. That's all about perfectionism. So think about that, because sometimes when we get feedback in, academia, whether we're faculty or staff, we don't always get that, level of attention to detail about, why we may not be meeting a goal. We may hear that we're not meeting a goal, but we may not get to the point of recognizing that it's self-sabotage or procrastination or something like that. It takes a different level of just awareness and thinking about how your life is going. So advocate for yourselves. It's so important. We advocate for others. I always tell people in healthcare this for sure. We're great to advocate for other people, but we're usually not great about advocating for ourselves. And keep a promise to yourself. And it may not be getting up on time. That's not mine, because I don't consistently do that well enough for that to be my daily promise. But, think of something that you can do every day that you're promising yourself that you can do, and you're not going to have to think about it. If habit change is something that you need help with, or, thinking about motivation and discipline, I have an archive talk on habit change. I teach it once or twice a year. So you can go to our archived webinars, and I bet Miranda can put that in the chat for us, and you can go and watch it, and it gives you some good ideas about habit change. But responsibility, I want y'all to think about this. Dr. Daniel Amen, or Amon, however you choose to pronounce it, Amen, he is a clinical psychologist, and his life partner, his wife, Tanya, I believe Tanya, she is a registered nurse, and she worked in the ICU for many years, and she has a really interesting life story. And she was doing a video with Dr. Ahmed about, responsibility and how important that is to our mental and physical health. And she had a lot of trauma as a child growing up and just had some stressors and challenges. And she said that what really changed for her is when she realized that when you take responsibility for something, it's not saying that you're to blame or you're at fault, but it's choosing to take responsibility in your response. It's your ability to respond to whatever, fill in the blank, XYZ. So you may not be responsible for the situation that's happening, but if you're involved, you have a responsibility to handle that, to manage that, to be proactive. So when we don't take responsibility for our lives, when we don't take responsibility for not getting up in the morning, when we don't take responsibility for not exercising or for not managing our stress, then we're giving our power away to someone or something outside of ourselves. And that is going to also erode our self-trust. Okay, I'm going to check the chat. Yes, thank you so much, Miranda. She linked it right there for you. So perfect. So 5 key skills that you can develop around stress management and resilience building is creating that self-awareness, which we're doing here today together, having attention, so the ability to focus and have flexibility around the things that you start to see as challenges or stressors or triggers. Letting go physically, so that means, letting go of the tension in our bodies, letting go of maybe physical reminders of what's causing stress, and then letting go mentally, emotionally. How can we let go of the things that are causing the stressors? Because sometimes it's about rumination. There's a great TED Talk. I should find it and link it to this presentation, but you can do a quick Google search, TED Talk, and then type in rumination and it'll come up for you. And it's all about, we feel the stress for a couple of minutes, usually no more than 3 minutes, because that's how long a physical stress response is. But the reason that we continue to feel that stress in our bodies is that we keep replaying the scenario or the stressor over and over and over again. And every time we do that, we're reactivating the stress response, and that's called rumination. And some of us are more prone to that than others, but all of us do it to some degree. So letting go mentally. So think Elsa when she's singing Let It Go. That's kind of the approach we want to have. And it may need to be something silly like that for you to remember. For others of you, I like to use this example. Coach Saban says next play a lot. So when something happens on a play and it didn't go well, and he's like, okay, next play, boys, because it's the next play. You've got to just move on to the next thing that you've got to do. And I think that is also another one that may be helpful. If let it go is not your thing, maybe next play helps. And you can mentally, or you can actually say that, and it will help your brain kind of adjust and get out of that rumination. So you will hear me say both. And I teach that to my students a lot in nursing school, because we certainly have a lot of stress as nurses in healthcare right now. And then you also want to assess and sustain positive emotion. And let me say, this is not that Pollyanna, everything is positive, toxic positivity approach to life. It is not saying that everything is perfect and wonderful. It's not rose-colored glasses. It's saying, even though this is not great, or this is stressful, or this is challenging, or this is not ideal, I'm still going to choose to be positive. It's not glossing over the negative and pretending that everything is fine. So I just really want to put a word in for that, because I do think that when we try to be overly positive about things that are really hard, it's invalidating to us and to others, and it doesn't help our mental health, because then we get into the shoulds. I should feel better. I should do this. I should be able to get up. I should be able to exercise. I should be able to manage my workload. I should be able to be less fearful about, COVID or whatever it is. And all of those shoulds are going to make you feel guilt and shame, and it's not going to be a positive emotion or experience for you. So try not to do that to yourselves or to others. All right. So positive reframing, this is one tool that I love to share with people, because I think it is the most practical and helpful thing that you can learn if you struggle with stress and you want to build resilience. So our circumstances, we're all right now trying to work in the middle of a pandemic, although things are looking better. That's great. But this could be any circumstance. Okay. So make this apply to you. So fill in the blank. You're trying to do X, Y, and Z and put the challenge. So then your thought about that is my life is hard, right? When we say I'm trying to work in the middle of a pandemic and parent, my life is hard, then we feel overwhelmed when we say that. And then our action is that we actually don't do anything. We have that freeze response. We do nothing or we feel stuck. And then the result is that our life is stressful because we're not actually doing anything productive. We're not taking action. We lose our motivation because that comes and goes, right? Motivation is fleeting. It depends on so many things. We really need to focus on discipline. So check out that habit talk. So we've got to really retrain our thoughts. So a new thought that we could say is we could say, I'm strong, or I'm capable, and I can change things if I want. So if we can think this new thought, and it could be even that it's a neutral thought, maybe this is too positive for you, because you can have positive reframing. You can also have neutral reframing. And neutral reframing would look like, I have survived things like this before. This is hard, but I have survived things like that in my past. So then you have this new thought, and what I want you to see is that the circumstance doesn't change, but the thought that you think about the circumstance is what changes, right? Because a lot of times, back to controlling what we can control, a lot of times we can't control the problem. We can't control the pandemic, right? But you can control the thought. So you can say, I'm strong and I can change things if I want. And I want y'all to repeat that out loud if you can. If you're somewhere where you can say that, I am strong and I can change things if I want. And it's even better if you can't see mine probably, but if you can do that Superman pose or that Wonder Woman pose or whatever superhero that you love pose, it lets your body know that you're taking up space and you're here. You're really putting forward positive body mechanics. You start to feel hopeful. And you start to take action. You start to get to work because you've changed your mindset and your thought and feeling around the circumstance. And then the result is that things do start to change because you started to take different action about it. And so the thing that we learn in life and health coaching is that when you have a negative or, an unhelpful thought or experience, to take a piece of paper, journal all of this out, and do that for every, circumstance you're trying to work through. That would be a lot of thoughts. We have a ton of thoughts every day. But if you start to do that on a regular basis, you will start to see that you automatically reframe your thoughts and your circumstances without having to intentionally take a moment and journal it or write it out. And it sounds silly, it sounds simple, but it really is effective. And it's something that when I have had personal challenges and hardships in my life, it has been very helpful to me to do this. And now I do more often than not catch myself doing positive reframes. Yes, we will share the PowerPoint. Miranda has it, and I think she will drop it in the chat in just a moment. So thank y'all. So cultivating calm, acknowledging your feelings. It's okay to feel stressed and anxious, staying informed, staying in touch with people, using calming activities, remaining hopeful and optimistic, using that modeling, of positive reframes, planning and preparing for the unexpected because it's what makes our brain feel safe. That is how you can create and cultivate calm in your life. You want to try to maintain what your sense of normalcy is. And that just means, that you have some expectation of what your days are going to look like. In academia and just in the world in general, it's hard to always do everything, the same every day. Mondays for you might look different than next Monday, or Monday might look different than Tuesday. And so that can be hard because your brain is looking for a routine or a rhythm or a normalcy for it to detect patterns and to keep you safe. So if you have a lot of changes in your schedule, that could be causing a sense of overwhelm and anxiety that you haven't really acknowledged. Take care of your mental and physical needs. Try to be mindful and take those brain breaks, like I mentioned. Focus on your breathing. If you're taking, fast, shallow breaths, then you're going to feel anxious. Your body will respond to that because your brain is going to think something's wrong. And so it's going to think that you're in a stress response and you're going to feel that response. And so, really working on mindful breathing is important. I'm going to share a resource with you. Keep your routines and rhythms simple. That means that you may have, different start days. You may need to be at work at 8 one day, but you can go into work at 10 another day or whatnot. Or on the weekends, your days might look different. But having the same rhythm is, I get up, I do this thing, and then I do this thing, and then I do the next thing. It's not saying that you do this at 8 and then you do this at 8:05. So keep those routines and rhythms simple, because that's going to help keep some simple, approaches, some normalcy in your lives. Establish routines and traditions and things that you can keep no matter what season of life you're in. Think fun, cheap, or free, and easy to maintain. So not elaborate things, to celebrate the holidays and milestones, but the simple things that make it fun. Like heart-shaped pizza on Valentine's Day is one that we do. And it is something that we can do even if we're sick, or even if, our budget is blown for the month, or even if we're tired, we can still get a heart-shaped pizza from Papa John's, right? It doesn't have to be Pinterest worthy or Instagram worthy. It can just be simple. And how can you make something with that in mind meaningful, manageable, and memorable without putting a lot of extra stress on it? And that's what helps with the work-life balance. Also, staying connected. There's some ideas here. We often think about just, elaborate ways to stay connected, and it's the simple things in life that really matter, I think, most. This is your permission slip, really, to put yourselves first, to ask for help, to say no, to take time for things that you enjoy just because you enjoy it. I really want to say, kind of as we're coming to our closing time together, is that a lot of times people will tell you, especially if you're female or if you're in a caregiving situation or you're a parent, that, oh, you should fill up your cup first, so that you can take better care of others, or put your oxygen mask on first so that you can take care of others. And what I really want you to hear is that you need to take care of yourselves just because you're you, not because you have others who need you, not because you, have children or people at work that need you. It's just because you're human and you deserve to have rest and to take care of yourselves. So the pouring from the empty cup and the oxygen mask on first, I think it has really good intentions, but the messaging really, I think, needs to be is just love and take care of yourselves well, because you're human and you deserve that. Here are some coping strategies, things that you can try if you really need to help with your stress responses. And we're sharing this presentation with you, so I'm just going to just briefly let you see those here. Again, might look totally different for others on the call, but these are just some ideas to try. Some wellness basics. Y'all, if you're not taking care of your body well, you're not going to feel like managing stress in your life. So sleeping well, staying hydrated, nourishing your body, eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and protein, having a protein, a complex carb, and a healthy fat at every meal is really good to help your body have the energy it needs to manage stress. Moving your body every day, even if that's just taking the stairs and parking a little further away from your building. And then those brain breaks are so important. So start there if you're struggling with those basics. Try to remember not to self-medicate. It's easy to do with the pandemic. All of these kinds of things, smoking, vaping, alcohol use, illicit drug use, those are all on the rise. A lot of people gained weight over the pandemic period, and it's all because those are things that are being used as coping strategies. And so just be mindful and aware if you're using food and alcohol and other substances to relieve stress. You may want to reach out for some additional help. Remember that finding balance looks different for everyone on the call, so don't compare yourselves to others. We all have our unique journeys and life experiences, and we all have our gifts and talents and challenges. And so your journey is going to look different from mine, and that's okay. That's expected. That should be the case. This is a toolkit of resources, and we will provide that to you. I'll click through. This is just an action plan of how you can look at what's really meaningful for you. I circled these. These are some for me. And let your core values and kind of your personal mission statement guide the things that you do. So this is a roadmap to resilience, and it's all about figuring out what your personal mission is. We know the University of Alabama is, but do you know yours? How can you be more resilient? Why do you want to be more resilient? And some action steps that you can take. What are you grateful for? What's a positive affirmation? What are the core values that you're, using to guide the decisions that you're making? And then what are the roadblocks or limiting beliefs that you have around the things that you want to do and accomplish? And then a TED Talk or two on mindset and stress, some breathing techniques that you can use, like I mentioned, to get your breath under control. Mel Robbins' technique of how to be more grounded. And then some self-care strategies on the go, some books, some websites, some podcasts and TED Talks, even a YouTube video on how to become more resilient. And then my good friend Julia Madrid is a licensed counselor in Tuscaloosa, and she has a 2-2-2 rule. And it's just basically keep something on the horizon to look forward to, because when we don't have something to look forward to, we really can become overwhelmed with our stress. So Brene Brown says, joy collected over time fuels resilience. So I hope you'll find some ways to add joy into your lives. It's so important. We would love for you to follow us on our social media accounts. Miranda and Ashley and Carolyn do a beautiful job of managing all of that for the Office of Wellness and Work Life. And this is our contact information. I'm going to go to the chat. I know we're at our time, but I will stay on if y'all have any questions or comments. Thank you. Oh, awesome. I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. How do you address work-life stressors when it might be that you're having some stressors with your supervisor? I think it's all about controlling what you can control and seeing where there may be communication challenges or issues, maybe misunderstandings. I think it's really easy to feel misunderstood. I think it's also really easy to feel like that a conflict with someone or a miscommunication with someone is about you. And a lot of times what I have realized, because, I've experienced my own set of challenges, I think sometimes it's just about everyone is really stressed. And so it may be that showing up for you in, an email that's not, overly friendly, or maybe it's too direct and to the point, or maybe it's, projection or something like that. It could just be that person is having stress and that they're not managing it in a healthy way, or it could be something else. So I would just recommend do some self-awareness around that, notice some patterns. If there's a challenge, speak directly to that person. And then look for people who are in your circle of trust that can give you some good feedback. I hope that helps. There's also many other resources on campus too, if there's things that you need to address. So reach out if you have more questions about that. Thank y'all all for the feedback. Deborah asked us, do you guys still have EAP services? So yes, but it doesn't look like it did before. So we had an EAP office that we shared with DCH and many other companies in Tuscaloosa. Now it's a virtual service that the name has just changed again, so don't let that confuse you. But we do have the EAP services, and it lets you be able to choose your own counselor and your own healthcare team within the network. So if you go onto the HR benefits page, you can get the link, and even in the newsletters that Carolyn McVicker sends out from Wellness Work Life, there are links to the EAP newsletter and how you can do that. You simply just give them a call. There's a customer service number, and they will authorize 5 visits for you. And you just tell them why you need it. There are some more questions with the new service, but you just tell them why you're needing that service and who you would like to see. And then they will give you an authorization number, and you can give that to the counselor if that's what you're wanting. EAP offers many other services besides counseling, but that's the most common. You give them that code, and then you can schedule an appointment. It's super, super easy. Yes, thank you so much, Miranda, for putting that in. We could not do this without Miranda's help. She's our tech guru. I'm just going to scroll and make sure I didn't miss any other questions or comments. Glad this was helpful. Thank y'all so much for the feedback. Any other questions? Again, you're free to go, but I want to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. Yes, Ashley, the video will be available. It will be under the archived webinars shortly after the presentation once we were able to get everything uploaded. So check back in a day or so and it'll be there. And feel free to share the videos out. You won't get credit if you watch them after, or if you send them to a colleague, but they're YouTube videos. You can send them to your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues. Thank you, Miranda, for posting that. Thank you. All right. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us today. I hope that you'll just take one small piece of the presentation and start to implement it in your lives. And, again, take what resonated, leave the rest behind. It truly is a menu of options for you. And just remember to take good care of yourselves and do it just for you, just because you're worthy and deserving of that. And if you ever need anything and you think I can be assistance, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to be a resource to you. We also have free health and life coaching for our UA employees and faculty staff, our UA family. So reach out if you're interested in that with me. But otherwise, I hope you'll have a great rest of your Wednesday and roll tide. Talk to y'all soon.